For week three discussion board, the first question is how are differing American identities put together in a sweatshop romance, a white heron, and a wife of his own? I think that in a sweatshop romance, the American identity is more the immigrant or Jewish um, people living in New York City, um, kind of during the industrialization age. I know it said one of the people working there was from Israel, but he was also Jewish. So I think just about everyone who worked for this sweatshop were Jewish or maybe went to the same um, place of worship. I don't really know what it's called, but and then in a white heron, it was more about a little girl who lived in a like a farming community. She lived with her parents in a more industrial area, but she went to live with her grandmother when her parents moved out to California, I guess to do some adventuring, and they just kind of left her behind. But that she really loves living in the country with her grandmother because it means she can roam around and just kind of play in the woods all day. And a wife of his youth. It's about an African American man who's a part of a society um, who is, I guess, trying to assimilate themselves into white culture in society, or I don't know, kind of whitewash themselves, I guess is what you could call it. Um, and he kind of um, he kind of has to make a tough decision about whether to propose to a young woman or marry an old lady who he had got married to on a plantation before the Civil War, who was at least twice his age but had been looking for him for 25 years. Um, because um, in that time, if you were married as a slave on a plantation, your marriage wasn't actually legal, and so he didn't have to continue with his marriage to the older woman if he didn't really want to. She didn't recognize him either when she first saw him, so he could have easily ignored her and not said anything to her that he was who he was, and he could have easily, went ahead and proposed to the younger woman, but didn't. And so it says think about issues of race, class, and ethnicity and gender. Um, I think that in Sweatshop Romance, one of the things of class it kind of got brought up was the difference in class between Bale or Bailey or whatever you want to say her name was pronounced, and the sweatshop owner's wife. When she's walking out, the guest kind of noted to herself that um, the employee had a lot more class and looked more like a lady than the owner's wife, and the owner's wife actually looked more like she would be the servant of the employee. And also in a sweatshop romance, for gender, um, I thought, and at one point it said something about her mother was kind of bugging her to sue for engagement or something like that, um, towards the guy who had been courting her for a long time but hadn't made any advances as to whether or not he was going to propose to her, even though he really was planning to, which I think meant that they could go to their rabbi and I guess they would either force him to marry her, um, is what would happen. I'm not really sure. That kind of confused me a little bit. Um, but she didn't, and she ended up marrying the other guy. Um, and in a white heron, it's about a little girl, and she, um, rather than having a romance, I guess, with a person, it kind of was more showing her love towards nature and the animals and um, the things that she really loved. And she kept her promise, I suppose, or she kept the secret so that they wouldn't come into harm.